Hello everybody again. This is program number 29. We have a couple of more pages in this section. We've just read that the Egoic Lotus shines forth in perfect, how is it said here? Yeah. Okay. The three petals, higher petals unfold, and the 9-petaled lotus is seen perfected. Okay. Now we move on a little bit, and this is sort of rounding up. We've dealt with the 9 petals, and there is no real discussion of the function of the synthesis petals. If we want to know what they do, we have to think about what goes on between the 3rd and the 4th initiations, particularly when they are the focus. So, excuse me, the causal body is then expressed in terms of fire, a blazing center of heat radiating to its group warmth and vitality. So we are speaking here of the interchange of energies, interchange between causal bodies. We remember that causal bodies occur in groups of 7 and 7 groups of 7, informed by the life of certain solar beings who express through these groups. So there's an interchange going on between all of those who have succeeded in opening the 9 petals, and I suppose there is a general enrichment occurring of causal groups. When the 9 petals have been fully opened, the causal body becomes a blazing center of heat. So this is being expressed in terms of fire. The warmth and vitality represent the solar fire, which is now fully infusing the causal body. And increasingly, the buddhi will represent itself through the 3 inmost petals. Within the periphery of the egoic wheel can be seen 9 spokes rotating with intense rapidity, maybe the way we would see a fan rotating now. It rotates so fast that the blades almost seem to stand still. We can put that idea down. Okay. Yeah. The blades of a rapidly rotating fan seem to stand still. And thus here, 3 tiers, 9 spokes, and probably all going in the same direction. The wheel turning on itself happens a little later when we enter the 4th stage, and there's a 4th dimensionality that occurs. So the causal body is seen then as a wheel in rapid rotation, and we can see that the powers of the petals are being blended and fused through this rotation. This is a growing synthesis. And after the 3rd initiation, become 4th dimensional and the wheels turn upon themselves. Well, how far after? It seems that maybe as we move towards the 4th initiation, perhaps. But we are dealing with synthesis and all things related to each other in every manner conceivable. We have previously discussed the 4th dimensionality of the chakras of different vehicles preceding certain initiations. Now we speak of the 4th dimensionality of the wheels found within the Egoic Lotus. Now, it probably cannot be described just the wheel turning upon itself, not just in 2 directions, but eventually in all directions. The wheel turning upon itself eventually in all directions. So such 4th dimensional rotation is always a prelude to a state of elevation or ascension. I don't mean the 6th initiation by that, but an upward moving of the particular factor that is turning in that way. or of the consciousness related to that turning. In the midst, forming a certain geometrical triangle, differing according to the ray of the monad, can be seen 3 points of fire. Now, this is very interesting. Here we have an example of the extraordinary symbolizing power of nature, and the idea, let's look at this, and the idea that God geometrizes. Now, it has been suggested, at least I've suggested it, in terms of the ray of the monad, which is probably, excuse me, one of the 3 major rays, that the first ray monad will be an equilateral triangle, and the second ray monad an isosceles triangle. And this is the question: will it have 2 45-degree angles? Okay, and 1 90-degree angle, because that's a special kind of isosceles triangle, and perhaps it seems that it might be the case. For the third ray monad, the 3 4 5 triangle of Pythagoras, containing within it so many of the important musical relationships. And it's, in a sense, scalene. All sides are unequal. But again, this is a right triangle. It has 1 right angle, 1 30-degree angle, and 1 60-degree angle. Well, it's been a long time since I've studied Euclid, but a few things pass on, and they do have their spiritual meanings. So these are the members of the atomic triangle, which form the 3 types of triangles. So 3 points of fire, or the 3 permanent atoms, or the permanent atoms on the mental unit in all their glory, consummated at the 4th initiation. So this is a great display, a consummating display of causal form. And it seems that everything is participating in this consummating glory, the rotation of the petals or spokes, and even the arrangement of the members of the atomic triangle. So we are speaking of a time which follows the 3rd degree, and judging from the glorious display, we are approaching the 4th degree, it would seem to me anyway. At the center can be seen a central blaze of glory, growing in intensity as the 3 inner petals respond to the stimulation, and let us say, and burst open, revealing the fullness of the central fire, the jewel in the lotus. The inner 3 inner petals are likened here to a central blaze of glory. The response of the 3 synthesizing petals to such a stimulation occurs only after the 3rd initiation. We're really talking about a great climax here. The impression is in some people's minds that, they are at this stage, but if one studies carefully what it really means, there is always what we call the neophyte's tendency towards exaggeration. The term glory suggests a great display of light, heat, and magnetism. When the fire of matter, of fire by friction, becomes sufficiently intense, and when the fire of mind, or solar fire, which vitalizes the 9 petals, and that's really an important point, solar fire, at least in its lower expression, vitalizes the nine. We can always find it on still higher planes. And when the fire of mind or solar fire, which vitalizes the nine petals, become equally fierce, and when the electric spark at the inmost center blazes out and can be seen, the entire causal body becomes radioactive. So this is a prelude to its destruction. We are attempting to become radioactive man. And radioactivity is the kind of thing which only increases rather than decreases. The so-called half-life idea may be contrary to the way esoteric nature works. Maybe there's a tendency towards growing radioactivity rather than a tendency towards the decay of radioactive bodies, however small. So we have a brilliant description here of the radioactivation of the causal body preceding its destruction. It broadcasts, shall we say. It casts what it is broadly afield. So there are three requirements which we will tabulate for emphasis. The fire of matter, or fire by friction, must become sufficiently intense. And this refers to the burning, the heat of the atomic triangle. The fire of mind or solar fire must become equally fierce. We note that it is solar fire that vitalizes the nine petals. In another and higher way, solar fire also, from the Agni point of view, would be vitalizing the inmost three. The electric spark at the innermost center, the monad's influence through the jewel in the lotus, must blaze out visibly. And we can assume that radioactivity of the causal body precedes its destruction. We are all heading towards that radioactive state. Let us say radioactivity for man signals consummation of the human stage. The masters still continue considered to be human in a certain sense, but they're at this point, I don't want to go there. Let's see, what do we have here? I want to go back at destruction. So at this point, there is no more need for reincarnation as a human being in a human body produced through human reproduction. If there is going to be a human body, it can be produced through the power of will, mind, and imagination, Kriya Shakti. Then the fires of substance, the vitality of the permanent atoms, escape from the atomic sphere and add their quota to the great sphere in which they are contained. So this is interesting, very, and we are speaking here of an occult process by which the energy of the lesser permanent atoms and the mental unit is absorbed by the triadal permanent atoms, and this will happen eventually. What is this great sphere? Is the great sphere in which they are contained the egoic body or the three triadal bodies, or first one and then the other? Possibly. Given the nature of the liberation and the fact that fire at the center of the jewel of the lotus must be transferred into the triad, one would be led to suspect that the great sphere is eventually, at least, the triadal sphere, the personality of the monad, though perhaps until the causal body is completely destroyed, there is not liberation into that greater sphere. We might say, perhaps, until the causal body is completely destroyed, there is not liberation into the triadal sphere. So there may be what we call a mediated transfer of fire vitality of the permanent atoms first in general to the sphere of the causal body, and then, as the causal body is destroyed, to the permanent atoms of the spiritual triad. And, well, you know, as I said before, it's difficult to know how that transfer exactly will work. We do know that the astral permanent atom will be transferred to the Buddhic, but with the other two there's ambiguity. From some point of view, it might seem that the mental unit should be transferred to the monastic permanent atom and the physical permanent atom to the atmic permanent atom. But it could be the other way around. It could be the physical permanent atom to the mental permanent atom, and the mental unit to the atmic permanent atom. Somehow that just doesn't seem as right as it could be. I don't think it's been stated. The fire of mind blends with its emanating source, and the central life escapes. The emanating source is the spiritual triad, and the central life escapes. Central life is the monad in extension, which escapes first into the triad, and only then, later, when, to the monad. And maybe the sixth initiation will somehow have to be undergone. Where does this central life reside? It seems necessary to keep the monad in extension until the monad is completely withdraws its extension back into itself. All right. Excuse me. If the fire of mind is considered solar fire, then the solar angel is the emanating source of that fire in one way. The solar angel, too, must return to its emanating source. So this is one way to consider it. The central life which escapes is the fire at the center of the jewel in the lotus. It is the fire of the monad, which may not immediately return to the monad, but which may be first absorbed by the spiritual triad. There are references that seem to say that. In what way, we do not know. It would seem that the initiate, now living focused within the spiritual triad and not yet focused within the monad, has need of the experience gathered in the incarnational process, and so the central life, which has been confined within the causal body, would, in a mediated manner, be temporarily confined within the sphere of the spiritual triad. Let's see. The initiate, now living focused within the spiritual triad, has need of the experience gathered in the incarnational process. Well, that would come from the permanent atoms, of course, but the vitalization would come from the central fire. The central life, the escape of the central life, is an alchemical transmutative process. It's the volatile essence, we call it. And the triad must still continue to be animated by the central life. So this is a little bit, a little vague as to exactly what happens to the central fire, but we do get the idea that it is first transferred into the triad, and maybe into the atmic area especially, but not yet a complete return to the monad, which we would expect at the fifth initiation. Oh, not fifth, sixth initiation. All right, so this is the great liberation. It's the liberation achieved at the fourth degree. There's another kind of liberation when the monadic vehicle is destroyed. When does that happen exactly? It is not stated. So the man, in terms of human endeavor, at least in terms of human endeavor, has achieved his goal. he's still a human being, we're told. They are no longer men as are the masters. DK is talking of the Chohans, so even at the 5th degree, there is still the connection with the human kingdom, and always the connection with the 4th creative hierarchy. So the temporary goal, at least of the 4th kingdom, the human, is the 4th initiation. There are other and higher goals. He has passed through the 3 halls, and in each has transferred that which he gained therein to the content of his consciousness. So the 3 halls are correlated with the 3 tiers of petals: the hall of ignorance with the knowledge tier, the hall of learning with the love tier, the hall of wisdom with the sacrifice tier. And we might say that the hall of wisdom continues even to the 5th initiation, for a master is a master of the wisdom. So all of this is built in, let's see, through the work of the solar angels. The quality gained is built into the egoic lotus and becomes a permanent part of the consciousness of the individual. That is fairly straightforward occultism. So basically what we see we are doing is making a summary of all that we have reviewed. He has, in ordered sequence, developed and opened the petals of the lotus. It looks like ordered sequence does prevail. I have made a case for ordered sequence rather than each tier opening all petals simultaneously. There may be a point at which there is a complete opening of every petal, but let's say the first petal will have less to open, then the second less to open, then the third. Then they will all open. So he has in ordered sequence developed and opened the petals of the lotus, first opening the lower 3, which involves a process covering a vast period of time. We are familiar with these quotations because we have used them before. The sequence is ordered, but there are necessarily overlaps and sometimes anomalies and irregularities. DK has talked about people who have not completely opened a previous tier but seem to have a petal open in the succeeding tier. And this, I suppose, has much to do with their karma and also their race structure. Certain peculiarities have happened, and it's an abnormal and uneven development where one would expect certain types of behavior and abilities, and they are not there. One would expect them from the highest petal open, but they have no foundation because there's been a leap, a jump. So the opening of the first 3 petals can take perhaps 90% of the time allotted to human evolution. There are ways to look at this: 30, 30, 30, 10, maybe 300, 300, 300, 100. But if you think that so many people have taken 21 million years already and have not even fully opened the 3rd petal, and these are the nice, good people in group 5, human group number 5, and they can probably be found in stage of adaptation number 4. So that's 21 million years, and maybe if it takes 25 million years, 4 million years remain. 4 over 20, it's 1/5, 20%. Well, 80% of the time allotted to human evolution, 80 or 90%. If it's a process, it is a process covering many millions of years, a vast amount of time. We can understand the lack of development of so many human beings at this time and why the world is in such turmoil because of the competing types of desires. Then the second series of petals are opened during a period of time covering his participation intelligently in world affairs. until he enters the spiritual kingdom at the first initiation. I don't think this is a technical, this is a general statement, as we discussed before. The spiritual kingdom at the first initiation covers the complete opening of the fifth and partial opening of the sixth. But the second series of petals are opened. And when the fifth and sixth petals are opened, we assume he is still participating intelligently in world affairs. It's statements like this, which seem to throw up a contradiction. When we looked at the more technical statement, we saw that when the star of initiation shone forth, 5 petals had to be open. And now it seems to imply that the second series are open, but are they completely open? You see, that's the point. But are they completely unfolded or opened? In any case, to me it looks like the first initiation sees, well, to a degree, almost the full opening of the second tier, but it could be quite a while. The sixth, the unfolding sixth petal may take quite a while, because I think it signals the sixth initiation. I'm trying to deal with the principle of overlap. I'm trying to look at what I call the 3-petal process, the simultaneous 3-petal process. So the processes connected with the opening of the second series of petals are intelligent. That's important. It starts out with the Cancerian petal, in which the 3rd and 7th ray come in, and Venus, of course, is an assigned ruler. Venus has the planet of intelligent love. So he is a participant in world affairs intelligently, and using Venus, the planet of intelligent love, in the second tier. I've shown how many different energies can be simultaneously used, but Venus is a prevailing energy, and from one perspective, its color is rose. Its color could also be the 5th ray color. It has, which would be the orange, and even a 5th ray color of a higher nature, which would be the indigo. The entry of the spiritual kingdom, the kingdom of souls, occurs at the first initiation, or a bit earlier. So we have seen some references. It's hard to pin down exactly. The causal body can move to the second subplane of the higher mental plane for what we call advanced man, who is not quite the initiate of the first degree. From other perspectives, advanced man can be even more than the initiate of the first degree. We have fluid terms here. So this, when the first initiation does come, this is the mounting of the fixed cross and the beginning of true discipleship. I do think, however, we saw that 4 petals remain to be unfolded, so we could not look at the second tier as completely unfolded by that time, because then there would not be 4 petals that needed to be unfolded. So, see, at the first degree, in the more technical writing, 4 petals remain to be unfolded, and so upon entry into the spiritual kingdom, SP, spiritual kingdom at the first degree, the 6th petal cannot be fully unfolded. Otherwise, there would be only 3 to unfold. So you see, in a way one has to count kind of carefully here and differentiate the broad statements from the ones that are more precise and technical. The opening of the first 6 petals takes us to the point at which the first initiation can be taken, but what do we mean by the opening? It's not the full opening. it is not, according to the theory we are using, the full opening. And I've shown why that should be the case by that very important reference relating to the star of initiation and of the first degree and the 4 remaining petals to be open. So I want to say that the complete opening of the 5th petal takes us to the point at which the first initiation can be taken, or the almost complete. But the initiation, before the initiation is taken, it is necessary that the 7th petal be at least vitalized and organized, and I've looked further into this, trying to correct as I go, and somewhat unfolded due to the strenuous and abnormal effort of the man. So to what degree it must be unfolded, we do not know, and that is something specific to be understood by the initiator, not possible for us to understand. So we have to be so careful about open and fully opened. So careful we must be about opened, how about that, and fully opened, and I'm going to use my own term here, specially adjusted, a relationship between tiers of petals, which begins their rotation relative to each other. The rotating 3 spokes, the rotating 6 spokes, the rotating 9 spokes. We're a bit like the blind man trying to describe the elephant, All we need is sight, and it would be so easy, but we're using the sense of touch, and so it's just piece at a time. Because touch is much more limited than the synthetic nature of sight. But this is preparation. As I've tried to explain, doing the groundwork makes sure that we will not fall victim to the astral phantasms, which just don't make sense. So once there is entry into the spiritual kingdom, a period of abstraction has slowly begun. I did go over this quite a bit, this earlier one. Are open, but are they completely unfolded? That is the word, and I think not. Opened, yes. And primarily this opening is occurring with intelligent participation in world affairs. But full opening is a different, we might say the second series of petals are gradually opened during the period of time covering his participation in world affairs until he enters the spiritual kingdom at the first initiation. It is problematic, but I hope I've gone over it sufficiently enough with other references to indicate that the full opening of the second tier is not really to be expected until there is unfoldment of the 7th, unfoldment at least through the abnormal and strenuous effort of somewhat of the 8th, and if the 5th petal, fully unfolded, indicates the first initiation, it just seems pretty obvious that the 6th petal, fully unfolded at a rather later time, due to the long period of time between the first and second initiation, will indicate the will indicate the taking of the second initiation along with the development through strenuous abnormal effort of the 8th petal and the continuing unfolding of the 7th. Excuse me. And the final briefer period wherein the 3 higher or inner rings of petals are developed and opened. You see, he's being very sequential. In all this, DK is being very sequential. SQ, TL? Oh, well, let's sequential. And he's acting as if one thing happens after another, but there is the simultaneous. We have also to look at, I want to call it, and I think it's a good phrase, differential simultaneous unfoldment. So a lot here, less ahead, and still less farther ahead, but all unfolding at to different degrees. In this case, the inner ring of petals is the sacrifice tier and not the innermost tier, the synthesizing tier. The final and briefer period is really much briefer, even than the period during which the central 3 petals of the love tier are open. That's a long time participating as an intelligent human being. Let's just say participating as an integrating personality. So as a complete human being, in terms of the third aspect, as a complete human being from the perspective of the third aspect of divinity. So we try to suggest that its opening could occur in a few thousand times faster than the opening of the knowledge tier. The numbers 770 and 7 may give the idea of the factor of 10. I'm not sure that the factor of 10 is even sufficient. I have suggested that the inner petals, in a way, can open even 3,000 times faster. Suggestion for hypotheses, even 3,000 or so times faster than the outer tier. 21, 22, 23 million years compared to a few thousand years for the inner petals to really open. And we have seen that the application of the rod does not signify the entire opening of the petal. At least that is the presumption here, because we know the rod has to be applied to the 7th petal for the first initiation. And we know that the 5th petal is completely unfolded, and 4 other petals have then to be unfolded till, let's say, the 3rd degree. Well, if the 7th petal were completely unfolded at the 7th initiation, at the first initiation, then that statement would not be accurate. There would not be 4 more petals to be unfolded fully before the 3rd degree, because one of those petals would already be completely unfolded due to the rod. I tried to deal with this earlier. Sometimes one must simply use logic, and then, sight will follow. In closing what may be said on the subject of the egoic ray and the fire of mind, I would request the student to bear the following point in mind. So we remind ourselves, amidst all the detail, that we have been talking about the egoic ray and the fire of mind, the vehicle through which the egoic ray principally operates. The vehicle through which the egoic ray principally operates. First, that the order of the development of the petals and the stimulation of the fires depends upon the ray of the monad and the subray upon which the causal body finds itself. Well, you see, this immediately violates the infallibility of strict sequence. Maybe there will be a tendency towards strict sequence, but there can be all kinds of anomalies due to the monadic ray. So the ray of the monad, and it's going to be one of the 3 that we're considering here, even though there really are 7, The ray of the monad is the chief factor, and secondarily the egoic ray too, the subray upon which the causal body finds itself. Both rays, we are told, contribute to the order of the development of the petals. So this is so important. It's not only the ray of the monad, it is the subray as well. In other words, if you have a third ray monad and a second ray soul, it's a 3-2 combination that is going to determine in some, according to some occult formula, the order of the development of the petals and the degree to which they are developed relative to each other in time. We can remind ourselves that this subray is the same as the ray, or really subray, upon which the spiritual triad finds itself, because all the permanent atoms of the spiritual triad are on the same ray, and it's the ray of the soul, really. The ray which qualifies the permanent atoms of the spiritual triad is the same as the soul ray, and from the monastic permanent atom, there's a strong stimulation which helps to create the egoic lotus, Buddhic monastically mediated. Buddhi flows to the monastic permanent atom, and I suppose is helping to create the innermost set of petals. So this thought would bear expansion and would prove a fruitful source of study to the occult investigator, and I think it will in later times when we can actually measure the years and cycles involved in the unfoldment. Everyone is a special case, of course. You cannot reproduce in any two people the exact ray structure and the modifications of astrology as well. But it gives an idea of how regulated the whole process is, and what we've been given is the generic cycle of unfoldment. I mean, if somebody can come to us and we can kind of help them realize what petal process they are focally involved in, what petal process might operate by reflex, what is their further extension, what they really have to accomplish in their life, and what energies from their astrological and ray chart they have to accomplish these, we will already have given some strongly orienting material. See, it's through a glass darkly at this time. It's pretty clear. It would be nice to know all of this as an exact science, but we are really not at the point in terms of the interactions of our society and how it's structured in our own minds, the structure of our own minds, where we can actually benefit from the absolutely meticulous fifth-ray knowledge of how this works. So during the course of these commentaries, we have speculated upon the order of activation of the different points in chakra triangles according to the ray of the monad. And it seems obvious that the ray of the ego will modify this order of activation, and this is not to forget, even in relation to the chakric triangles. It's also well regulated, all under the Department of Karma. We have no idea how really dense we are when we compare to the intelligence that is administrating the relationship of our consciousness to our form. For instance, if a first-ray monad would tend to stimulate only as a last resort the triangular point in a triangle representing love, then a first-ray monad with a second-ray ego, as a subray, would hasten the stimulation of that love-related point of the triangle, more than a first-ray monad with a third ray ego. You see how it would work. DK has told us that basically it's always the third aspect chakra that activates first. They do go in order, and that the most difficult to activate is that which is on the first ray. But for the second ray type, the second chakra, point in triangle, is opened almost as rapidly as the first one. And certainly for the first ray type, although the area of sacrifice is the most difficult, the first ray area, it would open much sooner than for the other types, even though it might be the last to really fully open. So we have the generic pattern of opening, and we have the special pattern of opening to be superimposed upon the generic pattern based upon the ray of the monad and the ray of the soul. So actually, what have we been looking at here? This is some kind of summary. First, let's see, to bear the following points in mind. So the ray of the monad and the subray of the causal body, the ray of the causal body, which is a subray of the monad, a subray of the monad. Again, you know, we have to be careful about the article a and the. The represents the only one, and a means it's one of perhaps more. Second, that this unfoldment proceeds slowly in the early stages and only proceeds with rapidity as the man himself works at it with conscious effort. So this means being aware of the higher of the pairs of opposites, and then you can be conscious about what you're striving for. Conscious application adds to the speed of unfoldment. I'm remembering Master Morya says, even take vitamins with consciousness. Don't just swallow vitamins, but take them with consciousness, because it will make them far more effective. He also advises us against the mindless repetition of mantrams. You know, probably your body already knows many mantrams, but if your mind is off there while your voice is repeating it, it's not anywhere near as effective. So conscious application adds to the speed of unfoldment, and one can rely solely upon the natural process, but intelligent attentiveness to process hastens the process and renders it more effective. The ego, now this we have looked at, the ego really, in a sense, what can we call it? The solar angel as the angel of the presence within the causal body. That's a way of defining it a little more precisely. Takes no active interest in the development until the second petal of the second series is beginning to open. And so we would say well before the first initiation, but at the time when an individual can become an aspirant, if not too caught up in lower ego, personality, identity. So while the ego is responsible for the overall progress of the process, its individual interest is not piqued until its personality has made sufficient progress. Well, when you use a word like ego, you know, you have to be careful. What specifically does it mean? Is it a higher intelligence within the causal body, Egoic Lotus? Is it the solar angel on its own plane? Something other than the man is operating here, surely. And, you know, the identity of the man on the higher mental plane, which is an extension of the monad, can also be called the ego. So we have to be careful when using the word ego, whether we mean that which the man really is and his identity as a monad, an extension on the higher mental plane in the causal body, Egoic Lotus, or the solar angel as an intervening entity which is supervising the growth of the man. But then, you know, there is supervising from within, because the angel of the presence seems to be that part of the solar angel which he inserted and which is present always in the higher identity of man, substanding that identity and substanding that consciousness. Anyway, the fact tells us much about the solar fifth petal and its relationship to the great second aspect. Somewhere it tells us also, we are told that the great second aspect of divinity will supervise the earlier affairs of the Egoic Lotus. and its early development. And then, from the same aspect, the solar angel becomes a downward-gazing soul and becomes more aware of what its supervisee is actually doing to promote growth. So there are different terms, you know, and we have to be careful what this term ego can mean. It can mean monad, it can mean triad, it can mean solar angel, it can mean the human identity within the egoic lotus, substandard by the interjected presence of the solar angel, which is known as the angel of the presence. It depends very much upon the context. But anyway, we note that the ego's interest occurs at the beginning of the opening of the fifth or second petal in the second series. In other words, long before the actual first initiation. One has to be an aspirant before one can take the first initiation, and there's plenty going on before that fifth petal can completely unfold, giving this just 4 more petals to unfold before the, quote, final initiation. What I think is meant here by final initiation is the final initiation with respect to the opening of the 9 petals. We can assume that for most individuals this interest occurred well within the last million years, and perhaps much closer to our present time, the so-called Aryan race. Given the long, if it has occurred, of course, you know, there are people who, as I say, you know, the fifth petal is just not unfolding yet. They are not integrated personalities. Given the long expanse of human development over many millions of years, the ego, we may presume, has been standing by, awaiting its proper moment of engagement, but otherwise engaged in its own affairs, own interior affairs, involving spiritual telepathy, we are told at one point. I mean, you know, that's a creative hierarchy far ahead of our own. So how in the world can we really know exactly what it is doing? We do know that DK did say almost humorously, well, leave your soul alone for a while, let it attend to its own affairs, don't be always importuning it. So we note here that the term ego, as used here, it appears to be equivalent to the solar angel, or, you know, maybe the projected aspect of the solar angel, angel of the presence. One must closely examine the meaning of the term ego. I've been saying this, and can mean different things in different contexts, and sometimes it refers directly to the solar angel, and at other times it carries a meaning more related to the inner spiritual life of the human being, even to the monad itself. As I pointed out, that the monad is egg-shaped in a way, or at least its vehicle is egg-shaped, and it can be called the ego also. So before that time, the work proceeds under the law of its being and through the inherent life of the second logos, there it is, which is the life of the petals of the logos. The life of the petals and not the solar angel per se, even though through the emanation of the solar angel there are lesser solar angels which are underlying the petals. But I suppose the matter of the petals is here involved as animated by the second logos. So the solar angel, you know, is not all that interested in everything its personality is doing, because it did a big job, you know, back in the point of individualization, either fanning the spark or inserting itself as the spark of mind. But I guess they'd had to look in at a certain point in later Lemurian civilization to assess whether its work had been accomplished. And that's certainly not a time when the fifth petal is opening, later Lemurian civilization, except maybe for the few disciples who existed there, but they probably were on the planet even before individualization and came from the previous solar system. So not only does the ego take no active interest in the development of its personality until a certain point of development has been reached, but as well no interest in the unfoldment of the petals of the Egoic Lotus. This is really, really interesting. But of course, when we become really interior self-conscious beings, integrated personalities, and begin to understand the higher of the pairs of opposites exists, that's a point at which we might say that some unfoldment begins to occur. We are working ahead, I suppose, in the sixth petal for some unfoldment to begin to occur in this fifth petal. We don't know, the exact cyclic timing of when the organizational vitalization work begins in any particular petal, and when a man leaves behind, no longer attending to a certain petal. Maybe we can assume then that when a petal is fully unfolded, the man no longer attends and trusts it to be automatic. Maybe when a petal is fully unfolded, the man no longer attends to it and considers it to be, considers its activities, its related activities, to be fully automatic. Well, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Certain needs are just taken care of. And we have within ourselves the automatic habit patterns to see to those needs. When we drive a car, it becomes automatic. We don't think about every shift of the gear shift, every turn of the wheel. We can't have attention that is on all things, even previously accomplished things, simultaneously. Sometimes it's difficult. People have a stroke and then they have to learn how to walk again. It becomes again a conscious act instead of a well-cultivated automaticism. But I'm giving generally the span of 3 petals of attention simultaneously. Am I wrong? I don't know, but let's see. I hypothesize a span of 3 petals to which attention is given simultaneously. One ahead, one behind, and then the focal petal. And our attention can shift back and forth between them. It is interesting to note that the life of the second logos, that it is the life of the second logos, which is responsible for the sustainment of the causal body, basically a vehicle connected with the second aspect of divinity. We must compare the thought that the second logos is the life of the petals of the lotus to the idea that the Manasadevas are involved in each petal emanatively. This comparison will be important. I don't know if there's any way we can solve it. The life, well, maybe the second logos is in a way somehow sustaining the solar angels themselves and their emanations. So we might say maybe the second logos is responsible for sustaining the solar angels and their emanations as lesser solar angels. There does seem to be one great solar angel associated with every man, but a number of lesser ones, and their method of reproduction must be a reproduction of themselves. So the method of reproduction of a solar angel must be an emanation of itself. It's not the coupling aspect that man goes through. There's so much that awaits us that is very different from how we seem to be proceeding under the division of the sexes. Here's an insert. It is interesting to note here that as the petal substance is Deva substance, and as the energy of the petals is the energy of certain Manasa Devas, one of the three higher orders of Agnishvatas, the initiate is overshadowed. A word is not entirely satisfactory in explaining the type of deva service here necessitated, but it must suffice, by a great deva, who represents the equilibrium of substantial vibration which is brought about by the efforts of the initiate, aided by the adepts who present him, and who each represent one of the two polarities of force. This is temporarily stabilized by the initiator. Okay, this is all about how the solar angels or Agnishvatas get involved in the initiatory process. But, you know, we're talking about petal substance is deva substance, and the energy, we might call that life, of the petals is the energy of certain Manasa devas. But are they, you know, we have to ask, are these underlaid by the life of the second logos? That would be a question. Probably too difficult to answer at the moment. But, you know, there are different points of view, and we understand that there's a whole vitalizing and formation power by certain Manasa devas which take the petal substance, which is deva substance of the higher mental plane, beginning with the third mental plane, and at least for certain parts of the Egoic Lotus, probably for the 9 petals at first, and build them into the form of the Egoic Lotus, and are their energetic sustaining power and the reason they are held in that particular form. So is it the second logos? Is it the solar angels or certain Manasa devas, or is it that the Manasa devas are underlay by the second logos itself? These are all to be worked out. It's quite technical, but one day it will be all clarified. One can see the universities of the future where this highest type of thought is really worked on with great clarity and can come forth into society very usefully, I would say. Then we have the next sentence from the Tibetan. The life of the first logos, working through the self, notice how it's capitalized, who dwells in a form built by the energy, life or energy of the second logos, out of force substance animated by the life of the third logos. I suppose that means Brahma in this case, only responds to opportunity when the above mentioned stage is reached. Well, when does the first logos really get into the act? When does the monad really get into the act? The work of the second and third logoi must precede the work of the first. Since the causal body was built, at a time relatively recent in planetary history, we can say that the work of the second logos was not completed at the second outpouring, but continued and continues until the present time. The second logos is the form builder, while the third logos is the substance animator, and we say first logos logos directs this process. Now, you know, this is the question. There is the fifth petal work being done, but this is the response of a second aspect of divinity in a certain sense. It is the solar angel standing in for the second aspect of the man, because it has not been sufficiently developed in previous times. So what has to be reached? Before that time, the work proceeds under the law of its being through the inherent life of the second logos. What is the time we're talking about? The opening of the fifth petal. It seems a bit early for the entrance of the first logos, but well, I am remembering this, that when the first initiation takes place, the monad becomes influential within the soul, but only upon the plane of soul, and is not detected, at first in the brain. Well, this seems a little bit later. The first initiation seems a bit later than the process of opening the fifth petal. We don't really have the years involved here or the lives involved here, but the first aspect that the monad serves becomes active at that time in that way, even though really a conscious part of the man's soul-infused personality more at the third degree. Notice that the third logos is connected with the first outpouring, the second logos with the second outpouring, and the first logos with what we might call the third outpouring. Finally, the ceremony of initiation is only undergone when the causal body is in a condition to respond to the will aspect of the heavenly man, the first aspect, and to do this through the glad cooperation of the fully conscious self. This is kind of interesting. Any ceremony of initiation, or do we mean the third? Do we mean the third initiation or any initiation? So there is a kind of acquiescence here of the soul-infusing personality with the intention of the first aspect to be active in the life. And as I said, that first aspect takes its place within the soul, but undetected at the time of the first degree. So we may presume that the fully conscious self here referenced is the soul-infused human being. To what degree soul-infused? That's what we must ask. Right. To what degree soul-infused? Initially, or rather fully? Excuse me. Our work in building the Antikarana is allowing us access to the will aspect of the heavenly man more rapidly, and we are not told which initiation is here under discussion, but it may well be initiation 1 through 4, any of those. Even at the first initiation, the monad influences the causal body, the egoic lotus, the soul. I could go try and find that for you, but it is clearly one of the references. I'm tempted to take a quick look. Well, that took a little while, but fortunately you didn't have to go with me as I searched through hundreds of monad references. Okay, we're talking about the word no. It's from Raised in Initiations 312 and 313. The word no in relation to initiate consciousness concerns the certainty of the initiate and his profound conviction of the fact of the Christ in the hearts. It is at the same time coupled with a reaction which emanates from the sacrifice petals in the egoic lotus. These petals are composed of the will quality of the monad and relate the soul to the emanating monad. Important. Now here we go. The first faint tremor of the impact of monadic destiny, I know not how else to express this concept, makes itself felt, but is registered only by the soul of the initiate. And on the level of soul consciousness, it is never registered by the man on the physical plane who is taking the first initiation. The brain cannot respond to this high vibration. So I think, we see that, and I'm going to kind of copy that, and let's see. Where do I want to put it? The fully conscious self. So we are not told which initiation is here under discussion. Even at the first initiation, the monad influences the causal body. Okay, that's what I want. Right there. Okay. So the first faint tremor of monadic influence, producing the sense of monadic destiny and hence a certain direction, is registered by the soul of the initiate at the first degree, but not really before. And with the unfoldment of the fifth petal of the Egoic Lotus, we do not yet have the first degree. Not yet. Okay. Excuse me. When the man mounts the fixed cross, we can say that the causal body has arrived at a condition sufficient to respond to the will aspect of the heavenly man. So this actually happens at the first degree, though unconsciously. More on this is not now possible, but enough has here been indicated to open up various fields of study, and that's really what he wants to do. These, if followed, will lead the student to much of practical value and application. Okay, and the Tibetan has given us much, indeed so much more than we can know by ourselves. And how will we avail ourselves of this treasure? I was wondering if people want to stand on their own level and try to see through a jungle, or jump on the shoulders of a giant who offers his assistance and see far beyond anything that could be seen even by very keen sight within the jungle. So anyway, the next subject is the elementals of the mental plane. They are lower beings than the solar angels, of course, and the thought forms they animate and the force centers and all that, but he wants to go farther. So in speaking of these, we are not speaking of the Agnishvatas, who express solar fire. We are speaking of the fires of lower mind. We're not really going to get into that subject. Their constructiveness, their destructiveness. A large question remains: are these mental elementals related to the creative hierarchy called Makara, or are only Agnishvatas related to the Makara? That is a big question, but it's another subject, not an Egoic Lotus subject. Before taking up this matter, however, I want to gather together some threads of thought in connection with the matter just dealt with. So it's a summary. So in this gathering together, we deal with Mercury and the third ray. The attempt at cohesion pertains to the second ray, making the whole, a whole, out of that which is gathered, an integrated network of relationships, and then seeing the whole as one. We might even begin to relate that to the first ray in isolated unity. So he's attempting to leave as few loose ends as possible. So he goes on and says, if we carefully followed the data given about the egoic manifestation on its own plane and the fires of the causal body, we shall have noted the close resemblance between the egoic body, viewed as a force center, and certain aspects of logoic manifestation. So the idea here is that if we study the egoic vehicle, we shall learn much about the life of the planetary logos and the solar logos. Both the heavenly man and the solar logos are in possession of a causal body on the higher cosmic mental plane, third level and first level respectively. And this causal body can be presumed to function in a relatively similar manner to the egoic lotus of the human being. Sometimes it's said to be 12-fold, very definitely, and other times, at least with regard to the egoic vehicle or egoic lotus of the solar logos, maybe 21-fold. That is enigmatic. The causal body has been seen as a wheel of fire containing within its periphery 3 focal points of energy, the permanent atoms. Not really, he's just being sort of general here, the members of the atomic triangle. including the mental unit. Okay. Literally the atomic triangle with the two lower permanent atoms plus the mental unit. Okay. They are analogous, as earlier pointed out, to the seventh principle of each of the three aspects: will, or power, love, wisdom, and active intelligence. So maybe there is some way that the mental unit and the monastic permanent atom come together. Maybe there is some way that the mental unit and the monastic permanent atom come together. Making a sevenfold unit, as is the case with the physical permanent atom and the astral permanent atom. Making a sevenfold unit, as is the case. So as these aspects express within the personal sphere, it is the directing force center. The permanent atom is that. The permanent atoms are not inconsequential. They actually have a high rank among the forces of substance. They are conduits for the highest of the seven principles in relation to the substantial sheath. They are related to the transmitting devas who are transmitting the intentions of the ego, higher ego. So holding their place upon the atomic subplane of each of the five planes on which they manifest, this high and directive position would be expected. So we have to, it's not entirely the mental unit. Really, the monastic permanent atom is still within the dense physical body of the Solar Logos, and maybe is somehow considered to be contained within this causal body, although most diagrams don't make it seem that this is the case. Each of these focal points has its own eternal economy, as seen in the spiridae, which are essentially streams of force, responding to stimulation and vibration aroused within and without their limiting ring pass not. Okay. So spiridae are not so much structures as they are streams of force. Of course, on some of these internal levels, energy force is structure, responsive streams. So the internal life of the permanent atom and that which animates and produces its activity is the life of the third aspect, the force playing upon and through it is the life of the second aspect. And I just want to kind of see here whether we're going to deal... I don't want to deal too much with the permanent atoms here because it's another matter. But as evolution proceeds, the intensity of the life forces from within and those which affect it from without grows gradually stronger and stronger, and the light of the permanent atoms increases. Okay, the petals of the lotus unfold, and the spokes of radiatory fire come into action. So these are parallel processes under discussion, and one process concerns the permanent atoms and their increasing light. The unfoldment of the petals of the Egoic Lotus parallels the increasing light of the permanent atoms, and as the petals are stimulated, their dynamic aspect as spokes of radiatory fire makes its appearance. I just want to, stick with the Egoic Lotus here. Bear in mind here that the permanent atoms are concerned with the substance aspect of existence or becoming, whilst the petals of the lotus or the fiery spokes of the wheel deal specifically with the psychical aspect or the development of consciousness. They are vehicles of consciousness instead of vehicles of activity. The central nucleus of the three inner petals, or the three inner petals, and including the central fire, embodies the aspect of pure spirit. So here's one of these important synthetic statements. He wants us to keep these in mind. Permanent atoms are not connected with the psyche or spirit. The petals of the lotus or fiery spokes of the wheel are not concerned with substance or spirit, and the central nucleus, the three inner petals plus presumably the jewel or central fire, is not concerned with substance or psyche. All three lines of evolution are proceeding simultaneously and have a reflex action upon each other. This is a very important idea, the reflex action of the various aspects of the egoic lotus upon each other, including the atomic triangle. So the focus of each is clear, but they do affect one another by reflex action indeed, and when a triangle representing the three aspects goes into rapid rotation, the interplay of the three aspects is indicated. The rapidly rotating spokes, the rapidly rotating members of the atomic triangle, the petals in rotation, let us say, if we want to look at it in that language, and maybe the pulsation of the central fire, does that possibly increase in its frequency? So all this is which produces the consequent perfection of unfoldment. So if there is to be perfection or unfoldment of the three aspects must enter into dynamic interplay. So it is neither possible nor desirable to follow each line of this threefold evolution separately, nor to consider them as dissociated from each other. The mind, using the fifth ray, wants to isolate and study everything in a vacuum, in isolation. So their constant interplay, obvious and otherwise, is maybe too great. The interplay between these factors is too accurate, and the mutual stimulation too important to be neglected by the student of egoic evolution. So he is advising us against separative study. Advising us against separative study. Yeah. We see that the interplay is not casual. It's accurate. It's not happenstantial, not by the way. So we have to learn to think relationally, and not just as regards one level of divine expression, but in terms especially of the three principal levels, spirit, soul, and matter. It is, says the Tibetan, as stated elsewhere, through the permanent atoms that the ego comes en rapport with the objective world. They do, through the atoms the vehicles are built, and the ego needs the vehicles. The permanent atoms are the instruments of the ego. They are its methods of influencing the objective world and of transmuting the experience gathered in the three worlds into something useful. And they are responsible for building the vehicles of the ego, the personality vehicles. So he works upon and through his environment successively or blindly, just insofar as he can energize his permanent atoms and bring the spiridae out of latency into potency. The more spiridae are activated, the more the ego has contact with the outer world. We must be aware of the importance of what is being said here. The permanent atoms are the bridge between the ego and the objective world, and of course the ego's relationship with the permanent atoms is in a way its own business. We don't know what that great divine alchemist, the solar angel, here pretty much referred to as the ego, can actually do with those permanent atoms. So with this process we can't interfere, and nor should we, it's beyond us. But we should pause. Does the term ego as here used still mean what is meant a little earlier in the text, i.e. the solar angel? Well, it seems to relate to the superior entity, or as much of it that is within our own egoic lotus and can effectively work. So all this becomes possible when he unfolds the petals of the lotus, his closer connection, the closer connection of that inner identity we call the ego, substandard by the consciousness of the solar angel. In a way, it's really our own consciousness. Ego is our own, in a way, but enriched by the presence of the solar angelic consciousness. The ego's increasingly effective relationship with its permanent atoms is indicated and assisted by the unfoldment of the petals of the egoic lotus. Power centers are built in that higher structure, and the higher structure can influence the lower structure, and the higher structure itself becomes an instrument for the indwelling life, which is the monad, the life of the monad in extension. So apparently such unfoldment makes it possible for the ego to energize the permanent atoms and bring the spiritae from latency to potency. It must be remembered that the three lower petals, when fully unfolded, affect through their vitality the three major spirillum in the physical permanent atom. As the second ring of petals gradually opens, the astral permanent atom undergoes a similar process, leading to the full arousing of the spirillum within the mental unit, of which there are 4. So we have to try to see how many spirillum are aroused with the opening of the different tiers of petals. So the correspondence is what we might expect. Have we noticed, however, that the 3 knowledge petals influence the 3 major spirillum in the permanent atom and not principally all the others? That's important. 3 above, 4 below, and even a lesser 3 still farther below. So this seems to be the case for the love petals, that they would affect the 3 major spirillum of the astral permanent atom. There are no 3 major spirillum in the mental unit. If we follow the analogy, however, we would expect the 3 sacrifice petals to be connected in some way with the monastic permanent atom. I've been trying to bring that idea out, and perhaps with its 3 major spirillum, the only ones it has. Here is another quotation brought in. The closer the approach to reality, the simpler will be found the arrangement of the spirillum. These streams of force show a septenary arrangement in the lower 3 permanent atoms, whilst the higher 3 contain but 3 spirillum, the major 3. Well, this is a little problematic, unless in some way we can blend the 3-fold monastic permanent atom with the mental unit and get a 7-fold expression. But then there are no longer a higher 3. So the monastic permanent atom, however, may be on a plane higher than that on which the 3 sacrifice petals are found. So the subplane placement of the various factors of the causal body has to be further studied. We don't really have 3 major 3 spirillum in the mental unit. So there's a little bit of a problem here. The mental unit is not septenary. The physical permanent atom and the astral permanent atom are septenary. Here I would point out that there is a slight difference, says the Tibetan, in the case of the mental unit, for the 4 spirillum of the mental unit are aroused to full activity when the knowledge petal of the final 3 opens. Well, that's a piece of technical information. It's let's just say interesting. INTG, interesting, and technical. That when the petal number 7 opens, then we're going to have the 4 spirillum of the mental unit fully aroused. But we don't, the higher 3 have got to include the monastic permanent atom. So, it doesn't seem entirely the clearest language, but at least we have the picture: the physical permanent atom 7, the astral permanent atom 7, the mental unit 4, the monastic permanent atom 3, Buddhic permanent atom 3, atmic permanent atom 3. So here is the explanation. The power of the knowledge petal of the sacrifice tier is sufficient to arouse the 4 spirillum of the mental unit into full activity. It is a very mental petal, isn't it? The 7th petal, petal 7, has so much to do with the cultivation of higher knowledge. This is like going to medical school to study this kind of material, and we will discover that every bit as much attention must be given to it as would a serious student give in a good medical school. So to what degree does this opening correspond to the achievement of mental polarization? That comes more, I think, in the 8th and 9th petal. Or would the true mental polarization appear later only as the 9th petal was opening through strenuous and, well, here we go, strenuous and abnormal effort. That proved to be a good abbreviation. I think some mental polarization is appearing in the end of the Scorpio petal process in the desert. Also, it could be appearing at the end of the Scorpio petal process, the temptations in the desert. We can see a definite correlation here between the first initiation related to the opening of the knowledge petal of the sacrifice tier, somewhat of an opening, and the arousal to full activity of the four spirillae of the mental unit. Okay, well, you know, obviously doctors would be in a tough shape if they could only feel their way and not see the anatomy. Reasoning is not yet sight. Pure reason is sight. The opening of the remaining two reveal the glowing threefold flower which lies at the center of egoic manifestation. So, reasonably revealed at the third initiation, but not fully. So there is some information here which is of value. I was afraid it was going to get too technical in terms of the permanent atoms and the atomic triangle, but it does still cast light upon the petals of the Egoic Lotus. So there has to be some light at initiation 1. There has to be some light coming through because the first of the synthesis petals is actually said to be opening. Maybe not very much. That was initiation 1. Initiation 2, the second of the synthesis petals opening. And by the time initiation 3 has arrived, 3 of the synthesis petals are opening, and there must be quite a light coming from the central fire. So here we have an amazing piece of occult information. It has been suggested that the third initiation, the bud surrounding the jewel in the lotus, is revealed. But a more gradual form of revelation of the 3 innermost petals is also suggested in the section of text immediately above. So, reveal the glowing threefold flower which lies at the center of egoic manifestation. And I don't know how the setup is, but there's some kind of opening that is occurring, whether the opening of the, I think we can look at it this way, whether the gradual opening of the innermost petals at each initiation is visible as petals before the complete opening of the third tier, we do not know, but opening there is. So they are open, and then the glowing threefold flower is revealed, maybe not as a bud, but as a threefold flower, to a degree open, but still revealing only translucence and not completely revealing the jewel. This threefold flower reveals the light of the light of the jewel in the lotus translucently, but not directly until there is the bursting open of the innermost petals. All right. So it has been suggested that at the third initiation, the bud surrounding the jewel, the bud, or, well, maybe we should call it better, flower, surrounding the jewel in the lotus is revealed, but a more Gradual form of revelation of the innermost petals is also suggested in the section of text above. Well, there is unfoldment of a synthesis petal at each initiation. The question is the unfoldment seen? That's the question. Well, that's that big quotation that we used. So how indeed do we reckon with this in comparison with what we just read? At the first, second, and third initiations, one of the three innermost petals opens up, permitting an ever freer display of the central electric point. Well, it may be a translucent display, Let's just say, at the fourth initiation, the jewel being completely revealed through its blazing light, its intense radiatory heat, and its terrific outflow of force. The display at the first, second, and third initiation may be a translucent display and not necessarily the revelation of the jewel itself. But you can see how these references require very careful reading. They may seem to be a little contradictory. So let's see where we are. Oh, well, there it is. I went searching for it, but I actually had it in front of me. That is the way. The reference below, in this, it is suggested that at each of the first three initiations, one of the petals of the inner three is open as follows. At the first, the second, and third initiation, one of the three petals opens up, permitting an ever freer display of the central electric point, and not just of the glowing golden flower. Not only of the glowing, how's it put? The glowing threefold flower. The glowing threefold flower. But perhaps this display is a translucent display. And at the fourth initiation, the jewel being completely revealed, so the bursting open of the flower involves all these things and contributes to the shattering of the causal body and the dissolution of the lotus flower. So these two thoughts seem slightly contradictory. I'm glad I noticed that a few years ago. In one, the first synthesis petal opens with the first initiation and is somewhat displayed. In the other, the opening of the eighth and ninth petal reveal the glowing threefold flower. Then there is the thought that only at the third initiation is the central tier of petals revealed. So we have to contend with some apparently different indications. There can be no doubt that ever freer display suggests that the time of the first initiation, the innermost petals are progressively revealed. I mean, if otherwise there would be no display, there would be no visibility. But I'm presuming that there is a kind of translucent radiation of the jewel in the lotus, and then a revelation of that jewel with no synthesis petals in the way. Eventually, there will be a revelation of the jewel in the lotus with no petals of synthesis in the way. Again, it's frustrating. One wants to see this just as one would study any object of nature. And, sometimes we may get tired of studying the so-called garment of God, but this is part of the garment of God too, and I don't know many students who would be tired of studying this kind of form and learning all about it. One could become as captivated by it as scientists are by the more superficial forms. So perhaps the seventh petal was somewhat opened at the first initiation, yes, but not sufficiently to reveal very much of the glowing threefold flower. Though, you know, some opening of that first synthesis petal had to occur, and some display had to occur. So, indeed, the indications are a little bit ambiguous, and we have to wait to see for ourselves. It would be wise, says the Tibetan, to sound a note of warning here in connection with this question of egoic unfoldment. What has been said here has been but the formulation of a general plan of egoic unfoldment as interpreted in terms of consciousness or of fire. Well, I'm glad that he's sounding this warning because, you know, there's not enough really for us to understand all the details. That which is a general plan may admit of many modifications in specific instances, and he did really talk about the ray of the monad and of the ego modifying. So in studying the subject with due personal application, the student should bear in mind the following fact, that according to the ray of the monad, so will the petals unfold. And we do recall in the previous text that the sub-ray of the monad, that is the egoic ray, ray of the causal body, also had some influence on when the petals would open, and presumably in any chakric triangle, the activation in time of the chakras in that triangle. For instance, and this is so important somehow, if the ray of the monad is the second ray, the knowledge petal will, you know, as per expectation, be the first to open, but the second petal of love will almost parallel its development, being for that particular type of ego. All right, look at that. Here, the monad is called an ego. So it seems. The easiest line of development, because it's a second ray monad. He didn't tell us anything about the ray of the ego. So it's that type of ego which is on the second ray. So the monadic ray is most important. The monad is implied to be an ego. But also that doesn't mean we're talking about an ego with the second ray monad. That's another way to look at it. It will be the line of easiest unfoldment. The knowledge petal will be, for it, the most difficult to open fully. There will be some opening of the knowledge petal, but full opening will be more difficult for the, well, what should we call it, second ray monad than for the first ray monad or the third ray monad. So we have discussed this process in previous commentaries. One wonders why the Tibetan switches from plural to singular, first discussing the opening of the petals, and then of the petal only, the knowledge petal. The knowledge petal will be the first to open, and the second petal of love will be almost parallel. Well, what did I mean there? He seems to be talking of a couple of petals, but finally he focuses on one petals. First discussing the opening of the petals, previously I suppose, and then of one petal only. Maybe one petal in each tier. Always the knowledge petal will be the first to be opened in a tier, but for the second ray monad, the second petal will almost parallel it, and the knowledge petal will not fully open. And for the first ray monad, the very difficult will petal will perhaps unfold more rapidly than for the other two types of monads. Notice how he kind of interchanges the word monad, the word ego. And at times he seems to blend with the monad, at times it seems to stand by itself, at times it seems to suggest the monad behind any type of ego. We talked about those egos that came in from the moon chain, basically on the first, second, and third ray, but they couldn't be, well, they can't really be egos because the individualization process requires that there only be fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh ray souls and personalities, unless for some reason the ones coming in from the moon chain could have a difference. But since so many of them coming in from the moon chain were very, very undeveloped, they had not reached the point where the ego could be the first, second, or third ray unless moon chain specifics were different. So there's all kinds of technicalities here, and I think we, just have to view for best value the general process. If there's going to be, but still, we talked about egos coming in and individualizing on the earth chain, and that second ray egos were in great preponderance, 75%. Third ray, 25%. Well, if they individualized on the earth chain, you can't have a second ray soul yet, because in the process of individualization it's got to be 4, 5, 6, or 7. So one has to look for the contradictions, and then one will see the layout of the process. So the ray of the monad, it looks like, so in this commentary, we have speculated on the relationship between the moment of the application of the rod, okay, to a petal, 7, 8, or 9, and the degree of unfoldment of the 7th, 8th, or 9th petal when the rod is applied, presuming that there is some unfoldment. We have actually presumed there is some unfoldment. Presuming that there is some unfoldment due to the strenuous and abnormal effort of the man before the rod of initiation is applied, before the ROI is applied. And now we see there is a complication. The ray of the monad will also influence the rapidity or lack thereof of petal unfoldment, and this will influence the moment when the rod is to be applied. But that's good to know, because obviously all of this equation is taken into consideration by the initiator, knowing the ray of the monad that is behind whatever type of ego it may be, ego in the normal sense. So sometimes it's earlier or later in the cycle, depending upon the influence of the monad upon a particular petal which is to be touched, to which the rod is to be applied. And the ray of the soul, or the normal way we use ego, is also concerned. The subray of the monad, a subray of the monad. So for the first ray type, it's my presumption that the love petal is hardest to open because they are lacking in love. And the will type, the easiest, even if due to normal procedure, the petal of knowledge will be the first to open because there's a resonance between 1 and 3. So DK has told us how very difficult it is for the first ray monad to be loving, so obviously the love petal for them is going to be very difficult to open, even though it is next to the knowledge petal in the normal sequence. So again, we have to watch this happen. We know where the deficiencies of people can be found, depending upon their type. Some people are just impractical. Some people are too practical. Some people cannot love. Some people are too loving. Is it possible to be too loving? Well, without wisdom. There's always these areas, these spaces of non-achievement. And they oftentimes have to do with the individual's type, and then they have to balance themselves. Here is the statement that I was going to refer to. I'm glad I gathered it at this time. The monads of power have a much greater struggle, and hence the fact so often apparent that people on what we term the power ray have so often a hard time and are so frequently unlovable. Does that mean they're unloving? They have to build in on all 6 planes the love aspect, which is not prominent in their development. All of us are responsible for rounding out our natures, and our normal tendencies will indicate the unfoldment of certain petals at a faster rate than other types. But then we have to build in We have to compensate for our deficiencies. And I think, there's so much about being a rounded out soul-infused personality, which has to do with what are our deficiencies. Now, I don't want to predict the future here, but if I were to be born in another life, I think I'd better have some pretty strong fifth ray and seventh ray to compensate for certain deficiencies which are so easy for my sort of 2, 4, 6, 3 type. The ego sounds its note before incarnation, says what's missing. So sometimes the personality ray is chosen. I want a shudder. I don't want a fifth ray personality, but maybe if it was to research the Egoic Lotus, I wouldn't mind. Anyway, second, that the effects of one circle of petals opening will be felt within the next circle at an early stage and will cause a vibratory response and hence the greater rapidity of the later stages of unfoldment as compared with the first. Well, a lot greater rapidity. A lot greater rapidity. Let's just say, if we have the 700, the 770, and the 7, and that's too small, the factor of 10 is too small, we have a lot greater rapidity of the second tier over the first, and of the first over the second. The facts and the figures would be fascinating to know, and when we learn all about the law of cycles, learning all knowledge on the third subplane of the atomic plane, okay, this will be ours. When we can use it, I suppose, and I have earned it and can use it constructively. So I want to say a lot greater rapidity. I kind of, it was a wild figure, but I said, look, what if the sacrifice petals open 3,000 times faster than the outer tier? You know how I got that, kind of taking the number of lives and the arbitrarily, and the number of years, maybe not so arbitrarily, but the first tier is not even open in 21 million years for so many people. So how long would it take to really open that first tier and get the, be working in the love area and have all 3 petals open up together? Another million years or more? Everything, there must be some kind of incremental speed whereby each succeeding petal opens up a little faster than the one preceding, except, of course, for the monadic ray and how that influences it, and each succeeding tier opens up faster than the one preceding it, and by a large factor. So an opening tier will stimulate the next tier and hasten the opening of that stimulated tier. Okay. We see that the opening of the tiers has an exponential quality. And each tier of petals opens faster than the previous tier, and the rate of the opening of the succeeding tier is actually very much faster. And I want to say that probably each succeeding petal opens faster than the previous. By what factor or multiplier? Does each succeeding petal, say, open twice as fast as the succeeding petal? I mean, I have no idea of the mathematics here. I'll have to talk to my friend Jose, who's an excellent mathematician. But there are so many variables because we're going to get the ray of the monad in here. Not only the ray of the monad, but the ray of the causal body. And not only those 2 rays, but the ray of the subsidiary monadic focus, any one of 7. So, when the Tibetan says something is too intricate for the human mind to fathom, and besides, what can we do with it? We have to pay attention to what our next level of unfoldment might be, and it usually is in the area of controlling the astral body or having better human relations or learning somehow to be harmless. I mean, these are fundamental things, and all of the rather divine mathematics involved with these measurements are beyond us, but just to know they exist is important. And third, there may exist cases of uneven or unequal unfoldment. And this we mentioned before, hence the danger of generalization when it comes to specific cases. He's just giving us the general degree of unfoldment. So quite frequently people are found with perhaps two petals unfolded in the first circle, one still in latency, while a petal within the central or second ring may be in full development. Well, how did that happen? Due to the special karma, maybe dharma, and ray structure of the individual. So what comes to mind is the unfoldment of the first and second petal with the fifth petal unfolded. This type might be found upon the soft line rays and might tend to avoid mental development, because there's a lot of mental development in the third petal and even in the fourth petal, which has a considerable third ray connected to it and is a knowledge petal. Well, this is the explanation frequently of the power in service along certain lines displayed by some, coupled with a comparatively low stage of development or of consciousness, egoically speaking. In other words, how did such an ability arise in someone who otherwise is so undeveloped? We might ask ourselves the question, did such an ability arise in someone who is otherwise so undeveloped? I mean, I think all the business of the adolescence of Mozart is exaggerated, but there's certainly some sort of extraordinary reception of the streams of music and connection to the Deva kingdom, which maybe were not completely supported by a mature personality. This is, the movie Amadeus makes that somewhat evident, and Roberto Assagioli talks about it in one of his books. I don't remember whether it's the Psychosynthesis Manual or the Act of Will, but he does say, okay, there's some contact with the divine mind here, but the personality just is not fully formed. So high powers can be accessed by people who are not very well rounded out. We just can't assume, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. They are highly developed along one specific line of expression and have arrested development along more normal lines. One remembers that a famous psychic, Peter Hurkos, was a house painter maybe. Was that it? He fell off a ladder and his psychic faculties were open. What happened? His normal personality was such as it was, and then these higher faculties suddenly appeared. If they were, they were certainly psychic faculties. So some time for rounding out will probably have to be divided later on. To perpetuate a lopsided development is ultimately dangerous to the integrity of the individual. Just imagine a machine that is knocking as it's running, and you put more and more juice into it, and it just falls apart. So it's that way when people do not have a certain smoothness in the interrelationship of their factors. A degree of harmony is sustaining of the structure, and when there is an imbalance, that structure may crack up. So this is due to varying causes, such as the karma of the monad itself on its high plane, and the strength of the monadic grip upon the ego. This is really interesting. I'm not sure how much we can make of it, but DK proposes some rather occult causes for such developments. It is important to note that monads do indeed have karma. They've been someplace before, right? Some people think that when they reach the high consciousness of the monad, they will be beyond karma. Not at all. The monad has had other venues of expression in some form or another before being this particular human monad. Maybe it was as an aggregate monad, but the reaches of what lies beyond the monad, or when monads begin to aggregate and form group beings on a higher turn of the spiral, all that is beyond our study, but it is somewhat like a higher correspondence to group souls. So interesting, but we have to differentiate between what is interesting and what is both interesting and useful. So The varying causes, for uneven development, the karma of the monad, on its own high plane, the strength of the monadic grip upon the ego. Well, right, and there's also the strength of the egoic grip upon the personality, but we're talking now about what appears within the ego and how the quality of the monad might come in there and influence development in a non-sequential manner. Perhaps many lives given to a particular line of action, resulting in the setting up of a strong vibration, one so strong that it renders the development of response to subsidiary vibrations difficult of attainment. Well, what about, that might be Mozart, What about the artist? The artist who takes many lives along the same personality ray. There are those, and he tells us this can happen, or, the rising sign for even for 9 lives is a possibility. Repetition of a certain quality will build that quality over much and slight or ignore the building of other qualities equally necessary. So all of us have to ask ourselves as we sort of sound our own note, where do we need the rounding out? So excessive focus in a particular direction makes a more rounded out development difficult. Maybe 6 rays involved, some sort of tunneling focus upon only one thing. We all prefer to use a well-established function than go through the pain of cultivating an underused function. And this was noted by Carl Jung when he dealt with his intuitive, feeling, sensory, thinking types. There's always an inferior function, and it's kind of difficult to develop that function. It's not easy to do. Here's a great 5th-rate type, and you put him out on a dance floor, and he can't move. And, he's so clumsy, doesn't really want to go through that. Could, but doesn't want to, because it's much easier to use that which is already well established. It strikes one that the Dark Brothers have exactly this difficulty. They do not want to go through the pain of developing their vastly underused vibration of love, because they're so good at intelligence. That's the problem. And it's just, it's kind of a laziness in a way. It's not wanting to humble yourself and go through the early walking stages. The early stages are painful in developing any function, and they don't exactly give you an exalted position. So if your lower ego is exalted by the use of a particular function, then you have to compromise yourself and develop another function when you look quite helpless and not at all that imposing or impressive. Some types don't want to do it. So in response to subsidiary vibrations difficult of attainment, certain peculiar conditions. So these are really interesting things, and just think that, is it so that Tibetan Buddhism, in its inner recesses, has this kind of information and access to these ancient libraries which were more current in Atlantis, or even Lemurian information? The Tibetan is translating all of this for the Western language. It's amazing what he's bringing forth to us. He's has been a Tibetan Buddhist monk of high rank, of course. Is this the kind of thing that kind of training will lead to? Anyway, many lives given to a particular line of action. That's a strong vibration. The karma of the monad, let's maybe I do list them later. The strength of the monadic grip. Many lives given to a particular line of action. Maybe I oftentimes like to break these out and use them. I don't know whether I've done it. And what else? Certain peculiar conditions hidden in the evolution of any particular lord of a ray. which is not necessarily a totally balanced being. And the effect of that conditioned upon a particular group of cells, and monads are cells. So the cause may lie within the Lord of Array himself, and one might not expect the problem to exist in relation to the more abstract rays, which are more inclusive. I don't know. You know, the lower rays of attribute are more concrete, especially the 5, 6, 7, and maybe monads on those rays are more cultivating along a particular line of exclusivity. But, you know, that's just a speculation. The group karma of a collection or congery of causal bodies and their mutual interplay. This may cause it too. It's amazing, all these esoteric causes. Every egoic unit or monadic center, that's what an egoic unit is, has a definite effect upon the group or community of egos in which it may have a place. And as the interaction proceeds, results are sometimes produced of a temporarily unexpected nature. Okay, well, I did list them, you know. It's of my nature to go through a paragraph and then try to list in tabular form. The karma of the monad on its own higher plane. This is all these given for the uneven development, right? The karma of the monad on its own high plane. The grip of the monad upon its ego. Did you ever ask yourself, what kind of grip does my monad have upon my egoic nature, my egoic lotus? Many lives given along a particular line of action. Peculiar conditions in the evolution of the particular ray lord. The group karma of a collection or congery of causal bodies. How would we find that out? And unexpected results caused by the egoic interplay within a community of egos. And all of this, you know, leading to those strange cases, those anomalies of uneven development. So it is probably best to reserve judgment on many matters concerning the apparently even or uneven development of those we encounter. We know too little, and it's always important to know how little you know. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. All knowledge is a little knowledge. Knowledge is a dangerous thing. Okay, these points should be carefully borne in mind by the student of egoic evolution. Are we that? That's funny. I was just going to ask myself that, and then I saw that I did ask myself that. Ask us that. Are we that? Students of egoic evolution? It's really an interesting area, isn't it? It's the history of that psychological entity that we call the soul. So one can see what an incredibly fascinating subject it is. Well, I haven't changed my view one iota since writing this some time ago. But I have corrected a number of things in what I have written. The whole subject is of interest, and that is the next step ahead for the student of occult psychology. You know, it's let's just say there is quite a bit of monadic psychology here, which has to be developed. One cannot simply talk of the ego, ego, without also talking of the monad. All right. So we are reminded that A Treatise on Cosmic Fire is essentially a psychology text. I think we can see how much clear knowledge of the developmental phases of the Egoic Lotus would add to our understanding of many human beings who might be seeking our assistance. Of course, for that we would have to have egoic vision, egoic sensitivity. We would have to relate to people as souls. Somehow look beyond, behind, and through the personality with spiritual discernment and detect what is this egoic nature which is sponsoring this appearance called the personality. We would ask, what is this egoic nature sponsoring this appearance called the personality? It would be interesting. And of course, DK is always telling us to look at people as if they are souls and not just relate to them as limited human beings. That would be so important and, you know, so rarely to be found. Not easy. Much will eventually be ascertained which will throw new light upon the possibility of work upon the physical plane for man. Well, okay, this is a prophecy. And I guess if we really know who someone is and what it is they as a soul are trying to do, then what they do on the physical plane will take on an additional importance. We seem to be dealing here, I say, with an occult form of vocational guidance, finding the right mode of expression for the human being who is considered as a soul. The whole secret of success, says the Tibetan, in any endeavor or enterprise is primarily based on two things. First, the ability of the ego to work through the personality, using it simply as a medium of expression. By this we mean the solar angel, angel of the presence, and man as the projection of the monad within the egoic lotus. I sometimes think of the ego as a composite term, the ego as a composite term, the solar angel, the angel of the presence, and the consciousness of the soul as a monad in extension within the causal body egoic lotus. I try to be inclusive here. They're all interpenetrating on those levels, and the method of the solar angel to help the monad is by pervasion, a kind of infusion, a kind of offering its presence. And how those things are done, well, we have to learn through experience. So we recall the recently mentioned importance of the permanent atoms as the instruments through which the ego can reach and influence the objective planes. So is our ego really working through the personality, and is our personality a medium of expression for that ego, or is it a rebellious and veiling, obstructing unit? Rebellious unit of obstruction. How's that, huh? Is our personality a rebellious unit of obstruction? Okay. Is it? Second, the karma of the egoic group as it becomes more apparent on the physical plane. So the whole secret of success. What is the karma, maybe the dharma too, of the egoic group as it becomes more apparent on the physical plane? Hitherto, much has been said and taught about individual karma. Group karma in the future will slowly assume its rightful place in the thought of students. And this will lead to a more intelligent cooperation, to a more sympathetic understanding of group responsibilities, and to a more adequate solution of group problems. Success, knowing one's group and what it has to accomplish. So perhaps we do not think as often as we should about the karma of the egoic group to which we belong. And, I really want to say, not only the limitations of karma, the limitations, well, how about spelling that, and advantages of karma, but the dharma as well. Dharma of the group. Purpose. So our own individual success is of far less importance than the success of our egoic group. Boy, let's think about that one. A large second-ray egoic group is present at this time. It's supposed to be, in a way, a John the Baptist, a spiritual propagandist for the ageless wisdom. Is it working? Is it working? So our own individual success of far less importance than the success of our egoic group. Groups, too, can succeed or fail. The dynamics leading to group success or group failure often evade understanding. There's been some, really good work done by esotericists, I think, at the Dallas School of the Ageless Wisdom, Gloria Crook, working with the whole group process and the stages through which it passes. But this will change as we move into the group age, the Aquarian age. Understanding will be ours. So let us tabulate the results of a deeper understanding of group karma. There will be a more intelligent cooperation, there will be a more sympathetic understanding of group responsibilities, and a more adequate solution of group problems. And this is success. Can the ego work through the personality, and what is the nature of the group to which the ego belongs, and what is its karma dharma? The study of occult psychology involves the true conception of the nature of the ego, or the arousing of the ego to full activity in manifestation, bringing through what is on the higher mental plane into full manifestation in the lower three worlds. How shall the ego be studied? How shall the ego be aroused to full activity and manifestation? Well, we are speaking of the rightful expression of the ego, the right expression, rightful, of the ego upon the physical plane. So the Tibetan has offered us much concerning esoteric psychology in his two books entitled by that name, and the energetic underpinnings of the study, however, are given here in A Treatise on Cosmic Fire. So following are a number of avenues necessary to the study and understanding of true occult psychology. And that's not just the psychology of the fourth force, which says, yes, there's a higher self, and yes, it directs your life, and yes, you have to get in touch with it. This is the study of the energies involved in occult psychology. So some of the laws of egoic unfoldment have been presented to us in the 7 laws of the soul, also in the rules for inducing soul control, found in Esoteric Psychology, Volume 2. They will be of value, the factor of synthesis, the quality of the hidden vision, the urge to formulate a plan, the creative life, all that. And that doesn't make any difference what your ray may be. It applies to all the different souls, methods of inducing soul control. We note that specificity of the proposed methods, we note the specificity of the proposed methods petal by petal. Each petal will have its own curriculum, and close attention will be paid to the necessary process through which people are passing, and the highly trained clairvoyants will be sure of that, and report and maybe even draw or somehow render what they see, so that the person progressing in the understanding of occult psychology will really see precisely what has to be done. So we're only in the earliest stages of setting up such a program of achievement. This further understanding of occult psychology will bring about an eventual apprehension, says the Tibetan, of the true meaning of force and of energy in its dual aspect, internal vibration and external radiation, force and dual energy. And so we'll be moving into a study of psychology as a science of subtle energy. Already in the study of the more subtle forms of psychology, this distinction is meaningful. Is that which I am experiencing coming from within me or from without? Or is that within me radiating into the environment as it should, with integrity? Or is it blocked in some manner by congeries of forces variously configured? So the question seems easy, but the discernment is often lacking. Are we, in fact, the radiant soul, or are we not getting through what we mistakenly think is ourselves? It will produce the centering of the attention of all advanced students upon the centers. In this case, not the physical centers on etheric levels, but the psychical centers such as the ego in the causal body and egoic groups. This is very interesting. So, it's not so much that we have to focus on the centers as they are operating within the dense physical body, the lower 18 subplanes of the planetary logos, let us say, but the petals are also centers. So let us remember, the petals are also sources of energy and can be considered as centers. Excuse me. So the instructions are clear. We are to center our attention not so much within the etheric centers as within the centers which are etheric, they may be, in a sense, for our planetary logos or solar logos. You kind of wonder whether the higher mental plane for our planetary logos is a kind of a etheric focus. I've often wondered that, but for our solar logos, you definitely have to be on the Buddhic plane. And there are egoic groups there on the Buddhic plane and within ashrams and so forth. And we have to center our attention there and bring through what is there transpiring transparently eventually. So if we achieve ashramic focus, the correct activation of our etheric, astral, and mental centers will occur correctly, so we need not focus within the dense mechanism. That is still the dense mechanism compared to the subjective mechanism, which is occurring first on the higher mental plane and then on the Buddhic plane. So this will produce later a better comprehension of the effect of one consciousness upon another consciousness on the physical plane, and this knowledge will be scientifically utilized to produce specific results in group evolution, and thus some of the world problems will find solution. Well, we're really into the excuse me, realm of prophecy here. How does one consciousness affect another, and what type of consciousness could best be brought into relation with another type to produce the best results? It's kind of a inner psychological alchemy. And we are dealing here with a form of, psychic chemistry, which presently is little understood in any factual way, though people may have feelings about how to handle such influences. I think it would be good to bring X together with Y. They'd have a good effect upon each other. Excuse me. I guess it's getting a bit late, but I do want to finish this. DK often would have X write a letter to Y. Stay in touch. Be a friend. You have something to give. You have something to receive. This is all part of this psychic chemistry. And finally, the laws of fire will be studied, and the nature of heat, of radiation, and of flame will be occultly investigated, and the action of one fire upon another fire. The result of radiation from one conscious sphere to another will be realized. The method of arousing consciousness on the different planes by action upon the fires of the causal body, and their stimulation will be gradually revealed. Prophecy showing the practicality of our study, the amazing kind of developments towards which we can look. So, I tend to tabulate, so it cannot hurt going over the tabulation. This is the most occult promise, so let us tabulate. The laws of fire will be studied, the nature of heat will be studied, the nature of radiation will be occultly investigated, the nature of flame will be occultly investigated, the action of one fire upon another fire will be realized, the result of radiation from one conscious sphere to another will be realized, the methods of arousing consciousness on different planes by actions upon the fires of the causal body and their stimulation will be realized. Well, revealed. So, let's see, this we could almost do now, haltingly, through the imagination, knowing how the causal body is, how the Egoic Lotus is composed. Well, one can imagine one's Egoic Lotus and working out of the vortices, different vortices, which have different powers and different rays and planets coming through them. They are like centers, and at some place we're told that the petals of the causal body do indeed control the chakras below. They do indeed control the man. So all of these are technical developments of the future, and they hold for humanity presently incredible possibilities. Presently incredible, but certainly tantalizing, certainly marvelous to contemplate. The whole question is slowly, very slowly coming to the fore in human thought, even though this is little realized through the study of vocational education, business efficiency. Is it the round peg in the square hole, square peg in the round hole? Is it the right person for the job? And the place of the human unit in any trade or enterprises, all these interest tests, some of the, ray analysis tests that we have been creating. Who are you? Where do you fit? What can you do? Men are being spoken of and considered in terms of potential force factors. And this is a step in the right direction. What kind of energy do we need to fulfill this job? And then we get a divine kind of configuration which is harmonious through the right division of labor based upon inner occult structure. So even today, occult psychology is making its appearance in rather mundane settings, and people are being understood in terms of energy and force, and this is the correct approach. And we can feel the hand of the Manu in this, seeking that individual human units and group units will find themselves this is the way I've heard it, doing the right thing for which they are ideally suited, in the right place and at the right time. I heard, occult hearsay, whatever, that it's the job of the Manu to make sure the people are in the right place. They're doing the right thing for them, for which they are, in the right place and at the right time. So approaching the same question from the personality standpoint, and not the egoic, the time is fast approaching, when the emphasis will be laid in education upon how best the young can be taught to contact their own ego, or higher energy. Well, we see this in AA, and, so many people resist this moment of silence because they think it's a religious thing, but actually, they fear dogma and all the rest, but something might come through of the higher energy in silence. The research on silence should be promoted, and it should be de-religionated or something. It should be put in psychological terms. How best they can be led to appropriate the knowledge and ability of the higher self for use on the physical plane. This is education. The Antiquran is involved, isn't it? Especially those people who are using the head, the ajna, and the throat centers. How best they can ascertain their group formation and thus work along with their group and in unison with the total energy of that group. What's my group? What's my place in my group? How best their threefold lower self, physical, astral, mental, can be brought into direct alignment with their higher center of force, and thus draw down a continuous supply of energy for the strengthening of their three vehicles and their wise manipulation. How very practical, right? How best the various spirili, it's a little more technical, can be awakened with, and the energy within their own cells released for action. Well, it's really the maximization of the human being. It's amazing. So these are, can I put that down? Is there such a word, The maximization of the human being. I guess I've used it before. It may not be a word. So here are promising possibilities, and some of them have already been developed or are developing. Some of these unfolding possibilities are quite technical, but others have been the very substance of the modern human potential movement. So let us tabulate. Education of the future will emphasize contact with one's own ego, or higher energy, appropriation of the knowledge of the higher self for use upon the physical plane. Meditate, I'll go into the quiet, I'll think about it, and see what's best to do, right? The ascertainment of one's group formation. To what group do I really belong, and what am I doing in that group? How best to work along with one's group. How best to work with the total energy of one's group. How best to create alignment of the threefold self with the higher center of force, because that higher center of force can have a different effect upon each aspect of the threefold self. How best to draw down the continuity of contact with the egoic force, a continuous supply of egoic force for the strengthening of the three lower vehicles and their wise manipulation, and not just, the rhythmic streams of force when the ego is first trying to get the attention of the lower man and the man ignores them, or maybe recognizes one or two. No, we need continuity of consciousness of the presence of the ego, and how best the various spirili can be awakened and their energy best released. Well, that's very technical, but it will come. So there is an all-powerful source of energy within every one of us. It is the true source of our nourishment, strength, and confidence, those higher streams coming from the ego that are discussed in A Treatise on White Magic. It is imperative that we learn how it may be contacted and utilized. In occult psychology lies one of the great hopes of humanity. So all this will be a thing of gradual evolution, but I have here outlined the trend of the future study. As in the formulation of possibility lies its eventual realization, a great principle there. So we look into the future, and we think of what may be, and if that what may be is in line with the plan, it will be. So such a process must necessarily be slow. The powers of the ego, i.e. soul or angel, really, or angel of the presence within the Egoic Lotus, are stupendous, and if released now through the agency of an unready personality would lead to dire disaster. Well, everybody says contact your soul, be more in touch with your soul, but at the same time, avoid overstimulation. So by this we may mean, I say, the powers of man himself. upon the higher mental plane are stimulated by the powers of the solar angel. The angel of the presence, stimulated by the solar angel, being, in a sense, the higher man himself, and those powers are tremendous. The powers of the solar angel, already trained on Sirius, is more than any human being could stand, I'm sure. So it all has to be well modulated. We could mean the powers of the solar angel, considered as the ego. Well, I'm going through all the things we could mean. We can see the need for personality preparation. Humanity must enter a great period of purification leading to the building of bodies which can withstand the powers of the ego. And this will be done under the incoming seventh ray energy. Better bodies, we're told. Better etheric bodies and thus better physical bodies. But the time will come. And in the meantime, a due apprehension of inherent capacity will profit all who have the intuition to recognize the goal of what is the man made, what is his stage of evolution, what are his powers, what are his deficiencies. Really study the human being for rounding out systematically studies so we can come closer to a balanced presentation of what our egoic nature intends and what's missing in the ego too, in terms of the egoic lotus and what has to be built in. So there is a tremendous optimism in the thought that within our very natures we have that which will strengthen, sustain, and lead to undreamt achievements. In dark times we need constantly to remind ourselves of our inherent possibilities. Well, my friends, I know I have blitzed through this. I wasn't sure to what extent it was really going to relate to our study of the Egoic Lotus, but it certainly does. I've spoken quickly, but everything is in front of your eye, and I think, you can follow what is being said. It's not all that difficult. The really, really heavy abstract thoughts are not here in this section. It's a section about our human potential. So, yes, I cannot say how long this program is because for some bizarre reason I did not turn on the resume recording. Oh my. But at least the recording is on, and we will know before long how long this is. So I'll just take a shot in the dark and say this has to be the end of this program. So this is excuse me. This is the end of Egoic Lotus webinar commentary, program 29. And it goes from TCF, well, it goes all the way up to, I suppose, from 542, 42 or 3, to, I think, 549. If I'm not mistaken. Well, let us just check this, right? Petal of sacrifice, the mental plane. From 542 all the way to... Oh my. It just keeps going, doesn't it? It just keeps going. There's a lot here. 549, yep. 542 to 549. And of an unknown duration. Due to the fact that this was not properly recorded in the audio. But Brett will take this, strip it off the video. It's probably the best anyway. And we will be beginning with the Egoic Lotus Webinar Commentary Program 30. And it will be TCF, I suppose, 822? Let us check, because we're going to deal with color now. And we will see. Yes, it's pretty much, let's see, 820 to 8, what? Well, maybe to 825, something like that. Let's just say beginning with 820. Okay. Beginning with 820, and we'll see how far we go. All right, we've done a lot today. and this will be sent out to you. I don't know how long it will take you to get to this point, but it's good to review these things together. You know, it's like giving a class, but it's very concentrated, because so often in the class, you know, you have to go slower. You have to stop for questions here and there. You can be led off the track very much. I just rely upon myself to lead myself off the track. In this case, I don't have class members leading me off the track. Well, really nothing leads off the track if it's a relevant question. So, okay, that will be it for the moment. And we'll start tomorrow with program 30. I'll come back and fill this in when I know how long our programs actually are. We'll see you soon. Let's keep absorbing this and applying it the best we can. Bye-bye.